All right. So today is all about having better conversations, asking better questions. My goal today is for you for the next hour to get some conversation models, dialogue. I don't really love real estate scripts, so this is not really a script class by any means, but I do know that we need the power of good conversation, the power of asking great questions is super important, especially in the market that we're in, because you and I know the real estate market is significantly changing, definitely in the last 6 months for sure. Um, those of you that have not joined me before, this is a free training that we do every single month, different topics, but I'll briefly just introduce myself. My name is Drew DeMaree. I'm the owner of an independent coaching and training company called the Freedom Companies. We started it back in 2020, right when the pandemic hit. Previously, outside of owning this company, I worked for Keller Williams Real Estate for almost over 10 years. I'm also a licensed real estate agent in the state of Virginia. I've been licensed for 20 years. Um, and so a lot of the conversations, a lot of the trainings that I'm providing comes from personal experience, personal training, certifications, but just doing the business, right? Just being a producing agent myself. We are independent, so we are not with any particular brokerage or firm. I coach agents in multiple states and also in Canada. So I have the privilege of helping new agents, mid-level agents, top producers, teams, all kinds of fun stuff. So I'm always learning and growing from and with my clients as well. So, like I said, today is about having better conversations. We all know that the market is changing. I was having a coaching consultation with one of my Canadian clients, and even in that market, they're definitely seeing a shift. More inventory, listings are sitting a little bit longer. Buyers are not feeling the need to do multiple offers, and home inspections are back. So you guys know this because you're active in the market. But some of these headlines are a true indication that there's a shift in the market. And so I believe that the sky is not falling. I think it's just the sky is changing. And we have to get back to some of the foundational, fundamental things to have better conversations with our buyers or sellers and our co-op agents out there. Okay. So let's kind of get started. This is just foundational. I think everybody in the industry knows it, but it's always a good reminder as we transition through markets what we're seeing or what the market is. Obviously, we've been in a seller's market probably at least a solid 5, 6 years. So that's less than 5 months of inventory. Most markets we're seeing that it's transitioning into what we call a balanced market, 5 to 6 months. And then if we hit over that 6 month peak of inventory, we're looking for a buyer's market. So we never can predict what the market is going to be in the future, but I definitely think it's heading away from the seller's market and into balanced slash buyers. And this, again, you know this because you're an expert in the business. It's also really dependent on the location of the neighborhood, price point, things like that. So we're still seeing multiple offers in some neighborhoods. We're still seeing home inspections and things are being waived to still be competitive in the market. So the one thing that's not consistent is the way that the market is in each pocket of each neighborhood, zip code, and school district, right? So this conversation or this training is all about communication, really about digging into how we can just be better at that. So good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. I think with the shift in the market, there's a lot of confusion with co-op agents, right? They think we're in a different market, or they maybe again they're in a different community, so they feel like it's less or more competitive. I also think often, again, 20 years of coaching in real estate, sellers and buyers are not always in alignment with what the current market is, right? So sellers still think they can get multiple offers. They think they can price their house whatever they want. You and I know that that's not the condition of the market, but they take a little bit longer to get caught up, right? So that's why there's so much confusion, and our job is to provide clarity, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is asking better questions, and I think um, you would almost think that this is a natural, easy thing, is asking questions, right? But that is universally what I found is that we're not always great at asking questions at the moment, right? If you've ever had a good conversation with a buyer and a seller, then you're like, oh man, I forgot to ask this question, right? So our goal today is to build a systematic way for you to build better conversations through questions. And yeah, I wish that it was just natural and would fall out of your mouth, but it doesn't always happen that way, right? We have so many things that are affecting or distracting us in the conversation. And so today, my goal is to give you a little bit of a blueprint so you can have better conversations and better questions. Okay. So first thing is I grew up in the Midwest. I'm one of five kids. I was the question kid, right? My parents would constantly in church or in a public setting be like, Andrew, like, stop asking so many questions. I've always been the guy to ask a lot of questions. In sales, it's always served me well. But that's not always the case with every personality, right? Some of us feel we're a little shyer, or we don't want to push, or we don't want to we don't want to interrogate someone. That kind of that feeling. And so, one thing I would implore you is the better you ask the questions, the less intrusive it is, right? The more we can kind of peel the onion back and ask great questions, they're going to give us answers that's going to lead us to the breadcrumbs or to some of the results we want. So often I hear through my coaching class their frustration that the buyer lied to them or the seller didn't communicate uh, some really good information they really needed. And my pushback to that is we, as the facilitator of that conversation, maybe we didn't ask the right questions, right? They have to build that trust. We have to build that alliance. And I will tell you, the more questions you ask, the better rapport you build, and the better and more honest answers they're going to give you. So before blaming your customers or your clients, kind of point the finger back at yourself. Maybe we can ask better question. Okay. So first thing is that it's important to really communicate with the right words, right? So when you start a question with why are you planning to move? That actually is the lowest level of communication. That doesn't open their brain up. That doesn't really it creates limitations on their answers. So, what is causing you to make a move? So that's what, which is further up this pyramid. That is actually what we call a thriving question. So, very, very often we are trained and coached and just embedded with our children and our parents to ask why questions. I would implore you that that is the worst type of question to start with, right? So, what do we need to do to get this house in the market? Who do we need to get in the house to make these improvements so we can get it listed by Friday, right? So, avoid why questions at all costs. It shuts your brain down. It shuts the consumer's brain down, and they literally look like a deer in headlights. So first thing is just that simple word change will start to open their brain to better conversations. So sounds basic, but makes a big difference in that, right? I'm not going to go through all of these because you know this, but questions are an amazing way to allow people to think bigger, right? You are the expert in this business, so you know that you've been doing this for X amount of years. They've only sold one or two houses probably in their lifetime. Average is 7 to 10 years when a consumer buys or sells, right? It allows them to open up and you to also be the person that's going to help them solve problems, right? So I will email this to you, but one of the things I have a tendency to, again, is that we don't have literally like the scripts or the dialogue. So if I'm having a phone call conversation, I would print this. So then maybe I could use some of these questions a little bit more intentionally rather than just off the cuff and winging it, right? So these are some of the best questions based on different phases of a conversation. So obviously, um, clarifying questions, the third one on the left is probably my favorite. Tell me a little more about that. Help me understand what you mean by that. Sometimes when people say a statement or say an answer to your question, you do need to go a little deeper. We call that like 3D, right? So also, when you're kind of giving them advice, maybe something that they don't want to hear, permission questions. May I suggest something? May I share something with you? Again, simple questions that you're going to put in like as a buffer in front of kind of the whammy question, right? The more intense question. That's just respect. It's kind of like meeting them at the front door and then stepping back, right? It's just a natural verbal way of giving them room to breathe and less feeling less interrogated, right? We're asking them some pretty personal questions. We're talking about money. We're talking about sometimes in some cases divorce, so the transitions of what that role those roles, right? So I want to make sure you're asking these buffer questions to kind of give you some padding, give you some room to build some empathy and understanding in when you're doing these consultations with buyers and sellers, right? Summary questions at the very end. I think this is super important, right? So you ask, let's say you're in a buyer or seller consultation, you're doing all the good questions, you're a rock star. It's really good to just summarize everything. So what I heard you say is A, B, and C. What our next steps are is one, two, and three, right? So our brains are processing a lot of information when we're asking questions. It's like Marco Polo, right? You're passing the ball to them, they're passing it back to you. At the very end of a really solid, good consultation, you've got to make sure you kind of have that summary questions and that bulleted out because that allows the brain to kind of wrap it around and put that bow on top. Okay. Again, some of this seems natural, but it's often the difference between winning the client and also building enough rapport that they can be honest with you, right? So this might be a great page to print off to kind of be front and center with and just continue to grow and learn with that, okay? I put this in here because I think it's important. I think the person who talks the most dominates the conversation. The person who asks the most questions controls the conversation. So I in no means want you to dominate over your buyer or seller, right? We want this to be a team effort. But we do need to control the conversation, meaning think of it as like a railroad track or a roller coaster. You want to guide them. And you have to go left. You have to go right. We're going to go up. We're going to go down, right? You have been through the consultation process, or let's say you're in negotiations with the transaction. You've done this before. They haven't. So you do need to control or guide the conversation because if not, high dominant clients will control you. And you know, I've done it. I've had that experience. It's not a fun experience because you're missing information. They're honestly not they're not taking your lead, right? So be careful about that. You need to control the conversation, and the best way is through questions, right? So often when I'm teaching this course, like in a classroom setting, I always say, do you consider yourself a good listener 1 to 10? I'll tell you the universal, almost always the number is in anywhere between a 4 to a 5. So about 50%, right? And so that's an honest answer, yet that's concerning because most of us, through having great productive conversations, the best part is us not talking, it's us listening to the other person, right? And so one of the best models I would ever recommend in any sales consultation is what we call keyword backtracking. It's when you repeat the words that your clients just said and you frame it back as a follow-up question. But not just any words, right? They're usually words that are kind of emotional words. So an example of a buyer is I'm a little scared about the market, right? So the market is not the word, it's scared. Scared is that you can hear it almost a crack in their voice. You can feel that difference, right? So when you're having a conversation with someone and they're saying words to you that have emotion in them, I'm super excited about, buying my first house, right? So what is making you so excited about? So using the exact word. Humans, when they're talking, including me, we say little weird words, little odd paraphrases, little slang that we use in our vocabulary, right? Really important for you to use the exact same emotional word back to them, right? Because we all know that you really it's almost like listening to a song when their octave of their voice goes up or when a keynote changes. That's when I know I've hit something. I've hit either a good question or a bad question or a nerve, maybe something that they're feeling. So part of being a great listener is looking and listening for those key emotional words and also listening to that emotional, like the way that their voice changes. Sounds a little weird, but it's super important because you are going to, I usually like a boomerang as an example, because you're actually saying their words back to them. It's like a boomerang or like a parrot. They're actually processing those words again. The frontal lobe of their brain is like, oh, why is it scary? Right? Or, oh, why am I excited? Right? So, super important for you to do this and pause and just let them marinate. If you're in front of them, the common when you're using keyword backtracking as a conversation model, they typically look up and their eyes kind of flip up a little bit. And what they're doing is they're kind of looking almost towards the sky. And that is the brain indicating it's recall, right? So they're recalling what the words they even said. So without getting too in the weeds and too nerdy here, I just want you to think about how can I follow up with questions that are using keyword backtracking will change the trajectory of it. And at the end of the day, what it's showing them is that you're listening to them, right? If you're using the same words that they're using, they obviously are understanding that, hey, he's listening to me. He cares about what I'm saying. So super building trust, super powerful. And then we have all had those people that are bad listeners, bosses, spouses, partners, kids, right? Um, the number one thing that I see when coaching people across the United States and in Canada, top producers, as great as they are, we have a tendency as real estate agents to wait to talk, right? So unfortunately, because we're waiting to talk, we're not listening because we're ready to jump in, right? Second biggest pitfall that I tend to see is that we ask the questions to a buyer or to seller, but this buyer or seller is only giving us a surface answer, and then we're moving on to the next question. It's okay to sit in the answer and ask more questions inside that same answer, right? So if you're feeling like you're getting only surface answers, it's not the buyer, it's not the seller, it's not the customer's fault. It's you moving too fast, right? And then we talked about emotional tone changes, right? Ups and downs of their ocular, their actual voice, huge indicators if you're really paying attention. Not being present. What do I mean by that? Cell phones, right? So if you're on your phone, they're going to be on their phone, right? So one of the things I highly recommend is just prompting it right away. If you're at a coffee shop, if you're at their kitchen table, you're just going to, again, respectfully say, hey, I'm going to turn my phone off so we can have a great conversation. And so I'm not distracted. What that usually indicates is they're going to mirror and match you. They're going to turn off their phone or put it away, right? Nothing worse than having a conversation with someone and they're on their phone or they're looking at their email, right? So we want to have that dialogue to where we can be present. And then keyword connections, things like that. Okay. So I wanted to break this apart a little bit because I think there's much more conversations with sellers than honestly we've had in the last 2 years. When listings sell in 24 hours and they sell for 20,000 over asking and have multiple offers, let's be honest, there's not a lot to talk about with our sellers. But when a listing is sitting for 30 days, and we maybe have limited amount of showings and open houses aren't as plentiful as they were in the past, sellers are getting a little nervous. So agents are having to have more conversations with their clients to bridge the gap of how much that is. So the first thing I wanted to make sure in having better communication with their sellers is I hope you have a system to communicate with your sellers with the activity of the listing. I'm giving you a little bulleted point here, and then I'm going to give you a sample of an email that I coach and recommend my clients to use, right? So this is really important to give a realistic, non-emotional approach to what's happening with their listing, right? So the first batch is showings and feedback on that, open house feedback, things like that. Biggest thing on that, if you look at the left-hand screen, feedback from showings and open houses, condition and feedback we can change. Condition feedback we cannot change, right? So if that house is sitting up on a hill or next to a railroad track and there's a comment about that, that's something we cannot change. Can't move the railroad track, right? But that's something that we may have to change our marketing efforts or our pricing, right? Competition updates, specifically using the word competition, not saying new listings, right? We're going to compare the competition of new active properties around the subject property, under contracts, or any closed listings that may be affecting the values that we initially priced the house at, right? CMA is a great right? Comparative market analysis, but they change almost daily. So you may have priced this house 3 months ago. The market has shifted in 3 months, right? So important that in an email or in correspondence with them, they kind of see how the market is moved. Your marketing efforts, make sure they know that you're working hard for them to be an advocate for their listing. Next steps, always, always, always have to tell them what the future plan is and then recommended adjustments, right? We need to fix this. Hey, they mentioned that there's cat pee smell, so let's fix that. Or hey, there's wallpaper that they don't like, so let's rip that down and paint it a neutral color. So you're probably doing this. And if you're not doing this, I highly recommend this is a little CYA, right? So here's a checklist. I'll send this in the recording email, but this is an email template. The great thing is you have a template, you can copy and paste it, change the text, obviously with the correct numerical changes or the correct feedback. Super important that you have a system for communication because this is something that you're going to have to give them. So I would always give my seller this information on Fridays, Thursday, Friday, just so they can kind of prep for the weekend, maybe make some changes if we need to make some changes, whether it's a price reduction or getting the carpets cleaned, whatever it is, so we're ready and prepped for showings. I will say that this is probably the most important because showings are limited. Some listings are only going to get 3 to 4 showings versus they used to have maybe 20, right? Every showing makes a difference. So how fast you react to this and how quickly your seller responds and corrects some of these condition changes could be the difference of getting an offer within that same week. Okay. Oh, and here's the checklist I'll send up to you. All right, and kind of the last on the seller side is it's that combination of this, it's the emotion and the logic. Us as realtors, we most often come from logic because we're facts driven, we're numbers driven. We've seen the cycle of the transactions throughout our career, but in real estate, sellers don't feel the same way, right? They're emotionally connected to their home, to some of the things that we're talking to them. So make sure you're addressing the concerns proactively. Don't chicken out. You've got to tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Okay. All right. Now we're going to just transition to some buyer strategies on conversations. We'll then kind of end near the end of this workshop on a really cool model on just how to have better conversations in general, asking better questions. And I think it'll be fun for you to map that out. Right. So yes, same thing. Buyer expectations have changed. The market has shifted dramatically with buyers. What I'm seeing and hearing through coaching clients myself is buyers are not as fast to make offers. They're not even as fast to go preview and look at properties, right? There's a lot of, I don't know if it's fear, but there's a lot of concern with different things. We've been dealing with higher interest rates for a while. We've been dealing with low inventory for a while, but there's now this new sense of, I'm not sure I'm in the mood. I'm not sure if I'm highly motivated. I might wait a little bit, right? Uh, and you've worked so hard to grab those leads. So we've got to do a better job of setting expectations for buyers so they feel some hope. They feel that there's the ability to buy in this market because there is. People are getting some great deals. People are buying their dream homes, selling their dream homes. And it's definitely not the time to sit on the sidelines. So see some of the tools that I think buyers should see, and this is something you should be providing and communicating in the email is some data, right? So MLS market reports, again, market keeps changing, so you need to give a snapshot. This is not just setting them up on a buyer portal, giving them some indications of some reports of how many days on market, what's the list to sell prices, things like that. In our market, we have Keeping Current Matters. I think they have a simplified, really cool visual graphs that you can use. Most of those are free. So keepingcurrentmatters.com, and they've got some great little handouts for buyers and sellers, but super great. Showing data time, again, showing them the difference of how many showings. This stuff is important for buyers to know because if they're like, hey, I've been looking for 6 weeks. I'm like, yeah, well, the average time is about 8 weeks, right? Things like that. So mortgage rate trackers, making sure you are connecting them with mortgage lenders that are going to give them accurate rate sheets, because again, that keeps changing because the market's changing. Okay. I use this form that I think is a game changer. It's super simple. I'll send this to you and you can customize it. It's the needs versus wants worksheet. When I'm working with a buyer sitting at, let's say, a at the Starbucks, I really want to early on communicate with them the difference between the needs they have and the wants they have. So I go through this and I have them fill it out. What do you need in a house? They fill that box out. What do you want in a house? That's the cherry on top, maybe an additional one or two things. What are the big no's? What is absolutely a deal killer for you? You absolutely do not want to see this in your home. And then if there's any locations specifications, right? Close to work, close to this church, close to this school, whatever it may be, right? This one page worksheet is super helpful for them to kind of start to chunk down what reality is versus what a unicorn is, and what I often say. This is great because what I do is I take a picture of this, I save this for myself, I print it, and I bring it to all the showings so I have it so I can really, again, I can communicate, hey, this is what you want versus this is what you need. Important for them to take the original copy and also say, hey, we're going to reference this in the future. I have so many agents that have leads in their pipeline, buyers specifically, and they're looking for a unicorn. They're looking for something that the market doesn't exist, whether it's price or a certain amenity, and they're not able to convert them because the buyer has this unrealistic expectation of this unicorn property, right? We have to get to a point in our consultation and asking great questions where you can't always find the unicorn. It's not out there or it's not within their financial budget, right? So really important to pause, take this one sheet and break it down so the buyer understands the difference. You need one level living because you have bad knees. I get that. I'm not going to be able to convince you to buy a two-story is an example. I want white kitchen cabinets. Okay. If we find the rancher, but it has dark kitchen cabinets, we can change the color of the cabinets, right? We can paint them, we can replace them. So that would be a want. So a want is like white kitchen cabinets, right? So really make sure they differentiate the difference between the two because you and I know that the buyer needs everything. That's what they think in their brain. But in reality is they don't always in this market based on condition and price and location, they're not always going to get everything that they want, right? And we got to just be realistic and we have to be able to convert the leads in our pipeline with that. Okay. Managing your emotions. So this is really all about you. And I have seen and I've experienced, I've seen text messages. The co-op agent on the other side is blowing up the deal, right? And so when the market's changing, the conversation changes. And sometimes the agent on the other side, hopefully not you as the agent, are making it worse, right? You're adding your 2 cents, you're adding some emotion to it. So the first thing I want to remind you probably are familiar with is that the DISC, which is a personality kind of profile, everyone has one, and everyone generally has slightly different profiles, right? So the DISC. So a dominant personality is more direct, fast paced. And they usually have a little charm and they have a little more energy. That's the influence of the personality. The S, they're a little bit quieter, but they're more driven by facts. The C, they're calm, they're a team player, but they definitely are very, very conscientious or compliant. So be careful about that. Generally, again, you probably know this, but generally humans are a combo of two of these letters. So like a DI or a DS or IC. The only reason why I'm bringing this up is that you need to know your personality profile, right? So I'll put in the email a free assessment. Virginia Association of Realtors, VAR, in our area gives you a self-assessment. I would love for you to go on there, click on it, take a little quiz, and see what your profile is. It's important to know kind of how you are, and then you tend to mirror and match, hopefully, the other person, right? So for my example, for myself, I'm a DI. So I'm a very dominant personality. You probably can tell I talk a little faster in the pace. I'm a little bit more direct. The I is the influence. So I do have a little bit of that charm and that energy, right? So I'm a DI in my more natural setting. But I know when I'm working with a buyer and seller, I need more of that SC. I need to be quieter. I need to be more fact driven. I need to be calmer. I need to be more steady, right? So we got to be that chameleon and we got to be able to flex to that. So if you're feeling a little frustrated with a co-op agent or you're feeling frustrated with a buyer or seller you're working with, I would love you for you to pull back your lens and go, hey, what profile would they be? And maybe how can I reapproach in a better way? Okay. And I've used DISC for a long time, and I think some people feel like we're pigeonholing or like labeling humans. No, we need all four, and we all have these characteristics in our body. I always joke it's like a parachute, right? The D is the person that just jumps, and you're like, all right, going for it. Didn't check the parachute at all. I is, they're having fun, and we're about to jump out off the cliff. And the S is someone who's like, hey, did we make sure we packed the parachute correctly? And then the C is somebody that's going to plan the event, right? It's going to like, hey, we need to be at this jump spot at 3 o'clock. We're going to jump in count of three, right? So the cool thing is that our whole world is connected with all these different profiles. But if we're not careful, it can kind of harm us in our communication and it can harm us with the questions and conversations we're having. Okay. Another great book I wanted to pop in here is called EQ, Emotional Intelligence. This is a great book to kind of identify if you feel like you're connecting with people. Inside the book, there's 5 sections: self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation, empathy, and social skills. The cool thing about the book, it allows you to kind of go through this and say, hey, how am I portraying my emotions to my consumer, to my co-op? Uh, Again, we just like with questions, we think it's natural. It's not. Um, a lot of some of the self-awareness or self-regulation, meaning don't say everything you think, um, is needs to be taught because we're not communicating effectively, right? Body language, to Alan, you know this, but that is something I. It's funny we have these tough conversations in real estate, right? We're typically telling people bad news, right? Hey, you have mold in the crawl space. Hey, you have termites. Hey, we didn't get the offer accepted. And we often now see everyone communicating by text or by email. Words, communication is only 7%. Everything else is body language and tonality. So if you're going to do a text, voice memo would be good. A quick video would be good, or obviously a physical phone call would be amazing. So if you're delivering not so great news to whatever party, buyer, seller, co-op agent, you got to add body language or tonality to it, right? So if you're just sending a really rough email, it's not going to go well, right? So sending a video text, say, hey, just sent over the home inspection addendum. Here's our few of our concerns, or A, B, and C. We're definitely excited to get to a conclusion of this, negotiate this so we can move forward. But I wanted to alert you, I sent you an email, right? So make sure that you're not just using that 7% communication, which is words, text, and email. If you're trying to actually deliver value and you're trying to communicate effectively, you're going to have to pick up the phone. You're going to have to use video messaging because if not, that grumpy news is going to blow up in your face, right? The future belongs to those who learn more skills and combine them in a creative way. I feel like I'm 20 years in the business. I'm constantly learning. And so this next section is kind of hopefully going to spark some ideas on how you can learn to communicate a little bit more effectively. It takes a little practice, okay? Um, and I've been saying this probably for the last 6 months, 2021, 2022, we were just in what we call a present market, right? We were just like trying to get through. We were running as fast as we can, writing offers, negotiating deals. We're now in what we call a skills market. So when I'm talking about better questions, better listening, that's the skills that's going to differentiate a great agent from a good agent. That's going to be differentiating the agent that gets paid their full commission versus somebody that maybe is going to be asked a discount commission, right? So be careful, be careful, be careful. I'm not going to go through this too much because I'll send this in an email. These are just some common objections for buyers and sellers, so I won't dwell on this too much. But I think if you have people in your pipeline, they're saying the same question, they're saying the same excuses, they're saying the same objections. So rather than beating your head up against the wall and getting frustrated with that, write down those objections and work through how you can kind of pivot or respond to those. Uh, Buyers and sellers typically say the same 4 to 5 objections. It's like a broken record we've all heard 1,000 times. It might be a country music versus a pop song, but it's still the same flavor. It's still got the same energy. And so you've got to reply. Don't just let them come up with an excuse. There's always a solution in real estate, right? So this is the last section. This is my favorite model to have better conversations. And so I gave you a visualization, but I'll tell you, I use a piece of paper and I work with buyers and sellers the same way. I use the same model. I just draw a T in a piece of paper. So you can see that white T in the on the screen there. And I'm going to use those little boxes that I created as a way for me to ask questions and put the answers in each one of those boxes. It allows you, the person asking the questions, to slow down. It also allows you to write the answers so you can start to write emotional words or responses that they're saying that you can use later, right? So I do this every time I do a buyer or seller consultation. And to be honest with you, when I coach agents, like I do initial coaching call, I use the same model when I'm doing an initial intake with you. Super effective. We all know people, humans, adults, kids, we're all motivated by either pain or pleasure, right? I'm going to the gym because I'm gonna lose some weight so I can fit in my jeans, right? Or I'm gonna go do all this hard work so because I want to go on this trip with my family, right? Or either motivated by pain or pleasure. Most humans honestly are motivated by pleasure, right? The positive things in life, but some are not. We need both types of conversations to interact with humans. If you've ever dealt with a human like this, where they're just rainbows and sunshine, everything's fine, everything's great, I'm fine, I'm fine, right? Not everything in life is fine, but they're camouflaging everything with positivity. There's the second type of person. I call them the Eeyore people, right? So these are the people that are constantly negative. They're just complaining about everything, the market, oh my gosh, I don't know, this buyer's horrible, the seller's list, right? There's generally those two extremes. Really high energy, positive people, they're camouflaging something. Really super negative people also camouflaging something, right? So we've got to bring some of that out so we can see what reality is and see what really is their motivation and see what we really need to do to help them. So when you're looking at this model, you're going to start on the top left and work your way down and then work your way to the right. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to go through this and then I have another slide to give you a real example. When we're in positive present, which is the first top left, we're going to ask questions. Let's say it's a buyer about what their current state is, like what they're feeling positively about right now. So I'm just going to use a generic example. Let's say you have a buyer lead and they're renting right now. So I'm going to ask some questions about their current situation that's positive. So, hey, you told me that you're renting a townhouse in the city. So, looks like it's beautiful. I know that area. What are some of the reasons why you chose to live in that neighborhood? And they tell you, okay, great. What are you currently paying in rent? What's the monthly payment? And has that gone up or gone down or stayed the same? What are some of the benefits of why you like living there, right? Close to school, whatever the answer is. They made a decision to put their hard-earned money into living in that space. So we need to know what they like about it, right? Don't go negative, go positive first. Then we're going to go negative present. Things opposite, right? So obviously we're here because you're considering purchasing a home. What is it you don't like about the townhouse that you're living in? Is there anything specific? So neighbors are noisy, or hey, it's a 2-story townhouse. I'm getting a little older. I want one level. Have knee problems, right? Negative present is all the things they don't like about it, right? The things that they wish they could change, right? So super important that you start with positive present, all the fun stuff, all the good stuff. Go to negative present, which is the current state of not the stuff they don't makes them grumpy and that they don't like. Then we're going to go into negative future, which these questions are always questions about the obstacles in the way, right? So this is the prime one that I say, what's your plan B if we can't find you a house? What's your plan B if you're not approved for you're pre-qualified? What if we can't find the house in the right school district for you? What's your plan B there? Negative future probably is going to reveal the most important situation because that's their motivation. Well, I'm going to have to move anyway. I have to move. I can't, I have to put my kids in these schools. I can't afford the hike in the rent, so I need to go somewhere else to have a more manageable monthly payment. Right? Negative future is really where you're going to see if their motivation exists. Then you're going to go into positive future. Agents do a great job with this one, which is we're going to find that dream home. We're going to find a great monthly pay. We're going to buy down the interest rate. We're going to do what we got to do to meet you with your budget, right? Positive future questions are going to be things like, hey, what do you look forward to in the future once we find the perfect home for you? What are you the most excited about through the buying or selling process that I can help you with, right? So interestingly enough, you're going to go through all four of these quadrants: positive present, negative future, positive future. You're writing them all down in a box. Each box, you're now going to have a piece of paper filled with information that's going to be powerful. You're going to keep this, and as you're doing showings, as they are pushing back on home inspections, as they are going through the transaction, you're going to use the words and the language. Remember keyword backtracking at the beginning of the presentation. You're going to use that as a way to guide them to making the best decision, right? So when they're freaking out and they want to get out of the deal, you need to bring this conversation model back up so you can remind them of what the negative future would have been if they don't move forward with the transaction, right? Super effective, super authentic, right? You're listening to everything you're saying. So this is example for the buyers. This is example for sellers. Again, I'm going to send you this presentation so you can print it out and do that. This is just one question in each quadrant. You're going to probably ask 3 to 4 questions in each box, right? Questions that are organically connected to their situation, their circumstances, right? So for buyers, you work through that. And then for sellers, you're going to work through that. This is a game changer when you're asking better questions. If you feel like you're not as efficient and effective in communication with your question asking, this is going to allow you to slow down and stay in those little buckets, stay in those squares long enough. People are going to see you writing it down. They're going to see the T. They're not necessarily going to like the cross that you wrote on the piece of paper, but they're not going to know that you're doing it in a model or systematic way. It's a great way for them to see that you're writing and taking notes as well. Okay. So hope that that model helps you. The theme for the whole day and the whole time we've been together is about proper communication through questions, proper communication through listening, and using systems and miles for you to be consistent with your buyers, your sellers, and the co-op agent. As you're going through the next season of the real estate market, uh, I'm here for you if you feel like you need a real estate coach. This is kind of the programs that we offer. You can scan this QR code and we'll pop in a Zoom session schedule for you. One-on-one coaching with me is $395 a month. I also have a group coaching option, and then I also have what we call like a 2 week. It's called a blitz, so it's just a 2 week program where I can kind of help you get some structure. If you're in leadership, such as like a team or like a team leader, or if you're a broker, we do leadership coaching as well. And then maybe if you have an admin or a buyer's agent, we can add those for just a slight additional fee connected to that. Okay. So that allows us to kind of come to the conclusion. If you haven't yet given a Google review, I'd love for you to just take a moment and scan this. Like I said, I'll send you the recording. I'll send you the content, the presentation, so you can break down some of the conversation models and the questions that I ask. If you want to join us for next month is about what we call the friend zone versus the pro zone. That one's going to be on December. Oh, that one's going to be, that slide slightly wrong. We're actually doing that one in November. So the friend zone one is November 13th. So we're going to do that one for you. And then I have a fun one we're going to do in December called Holiday Haze. So scan this QR code. This is also where all of the recordings go. So I've done recordings throughout the whole year. You want to pop in there and look at other recordings, other training topics. You can have access to that there. But that is it, and I hope you have an amazing day. Let me stop this recording so we're good to go.